This is the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, Episode 4.
Be around the football. Even if you don't know how you're going to get involved, even if you don't think there's anything that'll benefit you, the number of times where I've just had a conversation with somebody or I've tried to help somebody get a deal over the finish line and I somehow have gotten involved in this deal, somehow ended up with a 2.67% interest rate on a wedding venue just by being around the football. It's probably been 5 times in my career that have helped me gain millions of dollars worth of equity in that time. So be around the football. Don't always look for how you're going to get paid in a deal. Just be there and see what happens. You're going to be shocked at the outcomes.
Welcome to the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the stories of seasoned, hands-on, and tech-savvy real estate investors. We'll learn the strategies and tools they use to maximize returns and minimize hassle, all while navigating the rapidly changing real estate market. I'm your co-host, Brandon Hall, and managing partner of Hall CPA, and I'm sitting alongside my co-host, Vikas Gupta, CEO of Azebo. With our combined 15 years of experience in real estate investing and entrepreneurship, we're here to help you up your real estate game. Let's get hacking. Following a career in tech sales, Nick pivoted to real estate investing in 2016. He now has a portfolio of over 150 properties, manages 2 wedding venues, which I definitely want to ask you about, and launched a coaching business to help others achieve financial independence through real estate investing. Nick, welcome to the show.
Man, I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on too. So let's start by just giving us a background on how you got to where you are today. Why transition out of tech sales and do everything that you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a big question. So if I go off on a tangent, pull me back in. But yeah, throughout my entire life, I've just made a habit of being the dumbest guy in the room, today included. Grew up with incredible family members, incredible parents, and a sister who's blowing me out of the water. Met my wife at USC, who continues to amaze me every single day. But I was never really focused all that much on my academics. I was always more of a career guy. I worked my way through college. And then did transition into that e-commerce sales where I managed a bunch of different big accounts for companies like Corsair and Razer. Amazon was my biggest customer. Best Buy was another one. So had that experience. Don't throw anything at me, but my most recent job was actually at Facebook or Meta. I ran their direct-to-consumer sales for their Oculus products. And my wife hates it when I say it, but for the last year or so, I have been an unemployed bum. I've kind of made that Fang Defy journey. And the reason that happened was that back in 2016, we had actually just gotten married, just bought our first house. It was actually a house hack, and we could talk about that if that's something that interests you guys. And I was told at my job that if I didn't do something that was illegal, they were going to find somebody who would. Now, I was able to find my way around it. I was able to kind of find an alternative, but I had to call my buyer and essentially beg for my job. I called this buyer, this friend, and he helped me out of a bad situation. And sitting there with tears running down my face in a conference room, I knew that I needed a change. And I thought at that time that real estate would be a really good way to make that happen. So I'd been listening to Bigger Pockets. I'd been reading all the blog posts. I had a couple influencers who I was also listening to on a daily basis. And I finally decided it was time to take action. And so it took me a couple months to figure my stuff out. I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. So for a variety of reasons, one of them being the price point, I settled on Indianapolis as my target market, where there were lots of turnkey providers. It's where all my influencers were talking about. And I really wanted that passive income. So I ended up purchasing my first turnkey out here in Indianapolis there in August of 2017.
So when you were house hacking, where were you living at that point?
Yeah, good call out. That was in a wonderfully affordable market of Southern California. I'm saying that sarcastically for anyone who's not aware. It was in a little city called Laguna Hills, just south of Irvine, near where I was working for a bit. And yeah, absolutely incredible spot. It was a dumpy little house that had an apartment above the garage that we were able to rent out, and that covered half our mortgage. So we upgraded our quality of life while simultaneously getting to build that equity on a monthly basis.
So you're in tech sales. You are house hacking a property, and I'm gonna accelerate through. I'm sure how long were you house hacking before you picked up your first rental?
About 8 months. 8 months or so. So not
And so
long.
you started looking outside of the California market, and it sounds like you now live outside of the California market. You live in Indy.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. During COVID, when my wife and I were both still employed in the tech world, we decided to hide out from COVID. We had a bunch of our investments out here in Indianapolis. We were tired of paying rent because we'd moved up to the Bay Area. We'd left our house hack, and we were tired of paying $4,000 a month in rent for a dumpy little house in the Bay Area. And so we said, hey, 6 months, we're going to move out to Indianapolis. And 2.5 years later, we fell in love with it and aren't going anywhere.
So you were living in Laguna Hills when you bought your first house in Indy, but then you were renting in the Bay Area when we fast forwarded. Do you still have the house in Laguna Hills, or did you sell that?
I was an idiot. And no, I would have done really well over 2021 and 2022, at least until some rate hikes occurred. No, I sold it terrified during 2020, right as everything was locking down. I didn't know what the heck was going to happen. So I decided to cash out and really missed a great opportunity. But, you live, you learn.
So walk me through the decision process to invest in Indianapolis. Like why that market? Because let me kind of like give you a little more context too. So this podcast is for tech workers, people that are in technology and looking to do exactly what you did, build a real estate portfolio and eventually retire. We at my CPA firm, we have a bunch of tech workers who are doing this exact same thing, and they're looking at all sorts of markets outside of California. So tell us why you chose Indianapolis.
Yeah, there were a variety of reasons. One of them is at that point, I had spent all of my money on that house hack down in Southern California and, just fixing it up and making it livable. And so we really didn't have two nickels to rub together at that point in our lives. So Indianapolis was a very affordable market. So that was one big factor. Some of the other factors that were important to us were positive net migration. That was something that we thought would be an indicator of future value of that property, a diverse workforce. Meaning, hey, this isn't Detroit back when it was basically one industry there. Very diverse. There's a variety of colleges. There's BME out here. There's just a ton of different stuff that's happening. And then the last one is rent to value ratio. And I know a lot of people calculate it a little differently. The way I like to look at it is the monthly rent divided by the value of a house. At that point in time, the 1% rule was something that you could very easily pull off. It was a $1,000 rental would cost about $100,000. We're not in that place today, but where it's dipped a little bit. Indianapolis is probably closer to a 0.8% on an investment property. But that was a very important factor for me as I was looking at it.
So buying your first investment property in Indy, being out of state, how did you identify the property? How did you find the right people to work with?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was a super well thought out strategy. It wasn't. I got lucky and didn't work with a couple of different influencers that were out here in that region at that point in time who ended up being less than kosher for all intents and purposes. But I did find a turnkey provider. And that company actually had a turnkey arm in addition to a property management. So I found it on an aggregator's website called Narada Real Estate. They're still functioning. They've got a fantastic podcast as well. And they helped to direct that entire process for me and make it pretty easy. So I wish I could say it was a very well thought out process. It was a math equation, the way I was looking at it.
What sort of issues did you run into investing out of state, and how would you do it again if you did it again?
I probably wouldn't start with a turnkey provider. I don't think that that's probably your best course of action. I think that if somebody's doing that many different services for you, they're probably a master of none of them. So my rehab wasn't terribly well done. They put a bad tenant in there, and then they were not responsive on the back end. So wouldn't necessarily recommend at least that turnkey provider. What would I do? I think it's really important that you go through and identify several things. And I like to think about it like a pyramid. You have to set what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. That helps to pick your investing criteria. You then move up to what that strategy is going to be. And assuming you're trying to buy something turnkey, that's pretty easy. And then you have to build your team up from there. And so you're going to need to find a fantastic lender, a fantastic agent, fantastic property manager, maybe a contractor, depending on kind of what you're trying to accomplish. And then an insurance agent as well in order to get across that finish line. And only once then you've kind of built that team, or at least have the contacts and have networked your way to that team, would I then go and look at the property to find that particular property.
So how do you go about doing that though? Because if I'm in San Francisco and I'm working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, how do I create the time to build that team? Or maybe like in what order should I build that team? Let's start there. What order should I build that team, and how do I create the time to do that?
Yeah, very tough to find the time. At that point in my life, I was terrified. And so I was putting that 40 to 60 hours a week in addition to probably another 20 into my real estate. And so I was trying to get my 10,000 hours as quickly as I possibly could. Now, I think there are probably more efficient ways of doing that. At that point in my life, I wasn't using networking to the best of my abilities. I kind of viewed every other investor out there as my competition. And so I definitely don't recommend that. Us investors, it's a rising tide lifts all boats type of situation. Yeah, you might lose one deal from somebody, but if somebody fixes up a house right next to yours, the value of your house just went up. So don't view everybody that's doing what you're doing as your competition. And I would network my way to that team. So Bigger Pockets is a fantastic resource. Facebook groups that exist out there. I can speak to Indianapolis. There's one called the Indianapolis Out-of-State Investors Group. It is the nicest group of people I have ever met in my entire life who are all trying to help each other. There's the occasional jerk out there, but they get flagged out pretty quickly. And so I would really utilize those different networks in order to find who people are using. With agents, that's usually something that people are willing to share quite a bit of. Property management, same thing. People might not be necessarily as willing to share a contractor, but for those other roles, people tend to be willing to share those. So I would really try and network and figure out who's doing good stuff out there and who is very investor friendly, because that's going to be the key to your success. You don't want a traditional real estate agent. You want somebody who's focused on long distance real estate investors and understands the requirements of a long distance real estate investor, understands the math, understands that you're not going to walk that property, that it's a math equation for you. And if that math equation doesn't work, you're out.
So I don't want to go through the process of building my team too quickly, but I also don't want to run into analysis paralysis. So like, how long should I really spend at this phase of building my real estate portfolio?
Yeah. Totally depends on how much time you're investing in there. My general recommendation is find your lender that you're going to use in that local market. The person that's supporting you there in San Diego, in that $1 million shack that you live in, is probably not the same person that's going to help you with your $100,000 property in Indianapolis. They're not going to prioritize your $100,000 loan the same way they would a $1 million loan. And for that reason, I highly recommend finding out your local lender who is willing to lend to out-of-state investors. That's a local, that's going to have the local appraisers, potentially local agent contacts who can help start that process. I would call around the credit unions, local banks, and once you've locked in who jives with your particular your particular way of working, then I would get that pre-approval letter, and that's when you start having those conversations with the agent. That agent, if they are truly investor friendly, I would have a bunch of interviews. I'd ask them a bunch of questions. But if they truly are investor friendly, they're going to know property managers. They're going to know contractors. So they can really help you build out that team very quickly. I would say that, if you're willing to invest several hours per week, you could probably get that done in a month and a half, 2 months to get that team built up. But it really comes down to your dedication and your willingness to get off the texting, get off of social media, and actually pick up the phone and build a relationship with somebody. Get on Zoom, build a relationship with somebody. You can't do it via text messages and emails, no matter how much we all like to think we can.
Got it. So to recap, make sure I got this right. It's lender first, then agent, then through the agent, you get the property manager. Through the property manager, you get the contractors. And then you had mentioned insurance agent. How did you go find the right local insurance agent?
Yeah, that was actually just a recommendation from Narada again, and they are the only team member that has been with me this entire time. I've literally changed out my agents, my property managers, literally every single person in my team except for that insurance agent. So find a good one. I can recommend one. I'm sure everybody here has a recommendation of somebody good who's an insurance agent in their life. I know that there are local guys that do incredible work out here. So yeah, I would just find somebody who can get you over that finish line and is willing to be a teacher. In all of these team members, actually, I think it's important that they are willing to be a teacher through the process, that you are vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. You're the expert. Teach me, and I will take your guidance. If I'll tell you what I'm trying to get to, but you're going to be the one that helps get me there. Same with the insurance agent. You want to make sure that it's somebody who can teach you what actual insurance products you're going to need.
How long were you investing at a distance, or were you ever in California building this Indianapolis portfolio? Yeah. Okay. How long were you building that Indianapolis portfolio before you moved out there?
August of 17, all the way through June, July of 2020. So, and I had built up a portfolio of 60 or 70 doors by that point.
So, oh wow, that's impressive. All at a distance. Okay, so what I would like to do is come back to building your own team. Specifically, how do you manage them at a distance? But what I want to jump to is how do you manage a turnkey provider at a distance? Because I think what I have seen is people will build a portfolio from a distance because it's cheaper in that area, and like you said, the rent to purchase price are much better ratio there than you're ever going to get in California. So they look to other markets, but I think what happens with turnkey providers is people get lazy, and they get lazy because the turnkey provider is doing everything for them. And so how do you make sure that your turnkey provider is actually doing a great job? Like, you went through some stuff. What would you have done differently if you could only use a turnkey provider in the future?
Yeah, great question. There are a couple of things that I would really like to think through. And this is actually my recommendation with your team in general. If you were to build a team that wasn't part of the turnkey, is you want to understand the incentive structure of these entire scenarios. With that turnkey provider, yes, they were going to make money renting it out for me on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, but that wasn't going to pale by comparison to that purchase, that actual initial purchase. So they were going to care a whole lot more about getting me across that finish line than they were about getting that 10% of my $700 a month rental, like $70 a month versus what I'm sure they made on what was a flip in that scenario, had to be just astronomically different. So understand the incentive structure would be the first thing. And then I would have people kind of looking over each other's shoulders and trusting but validating. So yes, I did do a third-party inspection. That helped me get some things fixed up that wouldn't have gotten done. But I probably would use a different property manager than I did than the actual seller of that property. The reason being, I want more people on my team looking at every single deal, more people responsible for the performance. If I had had a separate property manager walk that property versus that initial turnkey provider, they would have told me, hey, this thing's POS. Hey, like this rehab looks good in the photos. It's not as good in real life. And it's going to be tough to find a great tenant to move in here. If I would have used a third-party property manager, I wouldn't have necessarily been as gung-ho, hey, this needs to get rented out as soon as possible so I can begin paying my mortgage, because the only way that property manager was going to get paid is if they got paid from the tenant. And that would have created a little bit of friction there in that process that would have slowed things down and found us better tenants through that process. So I highly recommend get more people on your team, more people looking at your deals, more people watching your back with differing incentive structures.
If you own rental units but don't want to pay for expensive software, check out Azebo, the smarter way to manage your rental properties. With Azebo, you can automate rent collection, find quality renters, simplify accounting and tax prep, get a bank account designed for real estate investors, and save on rental property insurance. All of these services are free through Azebo. Join thousands of real estate investors who trust Azebo to manage their rental business in one convenient platform. Sign up today at azebo.com/HRE. That's AZIBO.com/HRE.
I think managing expectations is really critical in my own experience, because I think that you come from a job where you're probably pretty good at what you do, and you carry these like high achiever expectations into your real estate investing, but you're working with a bunch of different contractors who do not have the same level of quality and output expectation. They're not going to meet that expectation. So you either have to temper it, or you have to find ways to hedge, kind of like what you just described. I'm going to go get another property manager to double check this to make sure it's up to my level of expectation. And I think also, Nick, along those lines, like you just said something really interesting that I have fallen victim to myself. I think what happens when you buy your first couple of rentals, you kind of start to you freak out a little bit because you're like, all right, I just put $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 into this deal. It needs to make money tomorrow, right? I can't, it has to make money right now. But I have also made that mistake where we put tenants in and then it goes for 8 months. They stop paying for 2 months. You kick them out. You can never get your money back. It doesn't matter if you follow them around or not. You're never going to get paid. And now you've got to do repairs. Now you've got to do another turn. So I have, and I still struggle with this, with my anxiety related to investing in real estate. Now I have 25 units now, so you'd think I'd be over it, but I still struggle with the calm down. It's okay if it's vacant for 30 to 45 days. If you get a strong tenant in, especially if you can lock them into a 2-year lease, it's okay. I mean, how do you kind of go, how did you, I don't know, how do you get over that sort of fear of this thing's not going to rent and slow down a little bit to make sure that you're getting high quality tenants?
Yeah. Well, I want to take a moment there and try and get pithy with it for a moment. But a vacant unit beats a financially vacant unit. And what I mean by that is there's 2 ways of looking at vacancy. One is if somebody is paying, and one is whether there's a head in a bed. Getting somebody out of your unit is ridiculously expensive. You're never going to get that money back. It's going to take a long time. You're going to have to turn the unit. So I would much, much, much rather just have a physically vacant unit than a financially vacant unit, because at least I know the property isn't degrading nearly as quickly. And so that's kind of the first thing that I always like to take a breather and be like, all right, okay, yeah, take a breath before I talk to my property manager, because of course, yeah, we all have bills to pay. We want those things rented out as soon as we possibly can. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you got to approach your buying with ranges. There is no, this is the perfect rent rate for this particular house. Whenever I'm doing an analysis on a property, I know it's going to be somewhere between, for instance, $650 and $800. And so I need to make sure that it's okay sitting there at $650 if that's the low end, where I know, hey, at $650, it's for sure going to rent. But I'm going to try that $799 first and then work my way down over time, understanding that, hey, if I've got to move it down, I've got to move it down. But if you walk in there with a one way a deal makes sense, one way a deal can work, you're going to be in a really rough spot, because unfortunately, none of us are that good at planning. The other thing you said there that I really appreciated and really liked was you commented that so many of us come in here with high achievement. We're, in my example, I was surrounded by FANG talent. I was the dumbest person in the room in a lot of those situations. And what I think you have to understand when you go into the real estate world is most of the people you deal with aren't going to be at your same level of achievement, and I'm not just talking about contractors, I'm talking about agents. It's one of the easiest jobs to get started, one of the hardest jobs to master. Same with property management. The good are really, really good, but it's very easy to get started in both of those. And be there willing to kind of learn from people who probably aren't at your same level of a raw IQ, but could still have something to teach you in those particular scenarios. I think that's just a really key thing as you're going through that.
Thanks, Nick. I think that's a common theme that we hear, that that no tenant is better than a bad tenant. But I like the way you put it better.
Oh, yeah.
That's much pithier. Financial vacant. That's a great term. I think I may steal that. I'd like to fast forward to where we are today.
It's all yours.
What does your current portfolio look like?
Yeah. So over the last several years, I've touched over 150 properties. Currently sitting at anywhere from 60 to 70 single family, small multifamilies at any given point in time. It does tend to change a little bit by the day, by the week. Most of that is long term. I do have a couple of short terms, a couple of midterm rentals, and we could talk about that if you want. And at any given point in time, we're doing anywhere from 10 to 15 flips at a time. And so doing what we can to kind of force that equity. And then, like we talked about earlier, been lucky enough or unfortunate enough, depending on who you ask, to stumble my way into two wedding venues, which has been just absolutely bananas and not something we would have scripted out if we would have been asked a year ago.
So the flips, are you flipping and then holding and renting, or are you actually flipping, buying and selling?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Usually we actually don't know what we're going to do on the front end. We just find areas where we can force equity. And if we've got the capital, then we'll hold it. If we don't have the capital, then we'll sell it. It's a pretty darn good place to be.
Are you self-managing your portfolio?
No, I fully understand that I want more team members on my side. Despite having touched 150 properties, I fully understand that I am not an expert and it's not the best use of my time. I would much rather pay somebody the 8 to 10% to property manage on my behalf versus doing it myself and having to schedule handymen to go out to properties to actually go show the units myself. You couldn't pay me to do that. It is the best 10% I pay on a monthly basis.
So it sounds like you are outsourcing to third-party property management. At what point do you consider vertical integration?
It's a great question. And you know what? We're probably at the point where that's something that we could think about. And it would probably save me a little bit of money. And I probably could go start my own property management company and do all of that. But that's not where my skill set is. That's not where my superpower is. And I feel like buying my time and not having to manage that is probably a better use of my time than you doing it internally.
Nick, I'd love to hear about the wedding venues. You said you stumbled into them.
I was about to say.
How did you stumble? How did you stumble into them?
Yeah. All right. So this was a weird one. I had these properties that I got an offer from a hedge fund back in April of 2022. And right after I just quit my job. And so they offered me about 10% more than I thought this portfolio of about 17 homes were worth. And so I just by pure dumb luck sold it right before we started seeing some softening in the market, sold these suckers. And then I was sitting there having to do a 1031 exchange. For anyone who's not familiar, that is a strategy by which you essentially don't take that capital out of that sale. You leave it all in the transaction, and then you have to go and find a similar or more amount of real estate to essentially redeploy those funds. Lots of rules. I'm not going to go into the particulars. Hire a 1031 individual to manage that process for you. But I was sitting there realizing I had 180 days to buy these potential new homes. And I was just thinking, gosh darn it, it's going to be such a pain in the butt to replace 17 homes if I go the single family route. So I was just thinking, all right, I'm just going to go park some capital in an apartment complex or something. And so I just cranked my Zillow minimum price up to the price point that I needed to hit. And I stumbled across a wedding venue. It's called The Wilds. It's down in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where Indiana University is based. And it was stunning. It's 125 acres. It's got a wedding venue, 2 houses on it. And I told my wife that I was going to buy a wedding venue. She said, "You were barely involved in your own wedding. What the heck are you thinking?" But once I kind of showed her the math and that it made a lot of sense.
Got you, huh?
Oh my gosh. Like I said, she's way smarter than me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, no, she got me. But then her only requirement was that I needed to hire a team. And that I wasn't allowed to talk to any brides. And so I agreed to it. We ended up purchasing this thing. And I hired the best team I could possibly imagine. And I hope that's the theme people are taking away from this episode is team is everything. Surrounding yourself with high quality people is everything. And so I've got this incredible group of people sitting there running that thing. I come at them with ideas. I come bust down doors for them. For instance, we just got our own liquor license. So we're going to be able to serve our own liquor, really do some revenue generation. I never talk to brides. My wife's happy. But what's kind of funny is how, and this has been the theme of my entire investing career is to be around the football. I was just around the football. I bought that wedding venue. And I had a woman reach out to me asking for my advice on selling her wedding venue not far away. And she was like, "Hey, I know you just bought the Wilds. Are you willing to hop on a call with me and just tell me like what you were thinking about when you were selling it because I need to sell my place." And so I hopped on a call, realized that this wedding venue is beautiful that she's selling, but it's virtually worthless from a business perspective because it has to be owner operated unless you have local infrastructure like we did. And so I ended up getting this thing under contract, and I put, I think it was the $825,000 purchase, $50,000 down, and she seller financed the rest to me at 2.67%. Just because I was around the football and I answered her questions. And so
Good for you,
now I am one lucky son of a gun, and I still don't have to talk to any brides, and I just get to go bust down doors and manage an incredible team that manages those properties for me.
How much?
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions too. I'm curious though, in the wedding venue, the two businesses that you own, how much of running those businesses resembles a real estate investment versus running like a small business operating company?
That is a fascinating question. Having never run a small company until this moment, I can't tell you what normal one looks like. What I can tell you is the way I viewed and how I underwrote both of these properties was very similarly to how I underwrite a single family home that I was going to own and add to my portfolio. The thinking was I went and I did a rent to value ratio where the rent is the number of bookings that we were getting and ways that I could generate new bookings. And the value of the property was obviously the cost that I used to acquire it. And you know how we were talking about a moment ago, those 1% rent to value ratio types of deals. These deals are probably sitting closer to 2.5%, 3%. Now, there is a lot more overhead. My management company is that team that I have to pay a full-time salary to and all of that. But yeah, it's the way I viewed it was very much a real estate transaction. And the way I'm looking to add incremental value to the properties, I'm trying to add those ADUs, which is I'm trying to add that liquor license. I'm trying to add potentially additional units on the property so that people are able to sleep and turn it into a hotel. So I'm viewing it like a real estate business. I would almost guarantee my team that works at those places would say I'm absolutely bananas for thinking about it that way. But that's just how my brain works.
How much more of a lift is it to manage this versus your like rental portfolios? I presume that this takes a lot more of your time. Is there like leadership and coaching that you're doing with your team and stuff? Like, are you really investing in that, or is it still relatively passive?
It's pretty passive. I'm intentionally trying to up-level my team. And so I do lean in. I probably have 2.5 hours of meetings with that team per week. And if I'm doing things to try and add incremental value, like I said, going and getting that liquor license, that was a headache. I won't lie, but it'd be the same thing if you were doing things on real estate to add incremental value to your properties. But yeah, it's about 2.5 hours of work that I put in on a weekly basis there, and I hand the rest off.
Fascinating. Now, you said you had the second venue that you purchased. It was worthless unless you own or operated because you needed local infrastructure. What local infrastructure were you referencing?
Yeah, I already have an entire team built out. We were able to utilize all of our existing employee base. We were able to utilize our existing infrastructure with regards to invoicing and getting people to the wedding day, which is, I was barely involved in my own wedding, so I was stunned once I purchased this wedding venue, the number of steps and the number of decisions that have to get made before that wedding day. If we weren't able to utilize a group of people that were managing inboxes and sharing responsibilities, it would have been ridiculously difficult to operate unless you were owner occupying.
Got it. So to dumb it down for me, just to make sure I understand, does that just mean that second one you bought was too small to support its own full-time team?
In its current structure, yes. And it's not size, it was revenue. The revenue couldn't justify it. It had been poorly run up to that point. It had been run by somebody who was an idealist and loved weddings and not a business person. And they made a lot of decisions that minimized the amount of profit and revenue they were able to generate. So what we're doing is we're bringing that infrastructure from a more successful venue, the thinking and the sales tactics that we use there. We're going to implement them over at the second venue, and by the time we're done with it, by the time we've stabilized it, it's gonna be at a point that it could stand alone. Not that I'm looking to sell.
So obviously, when you buy a business, there's a lot of things that you can do to improve it. Some of which you've touched on here. But let's say that I need a way to get bookings as fast as possible, or in a more consistent way to get bookings. how would you do that? Like if you're buying a wedding venue now and you're saying, man, we need to get bookings up, what are you doing to do that?
Yeah, it's actually the same thing that a lot of the wholesalers think about when they're going about the entire process of building out their funnel. You have to think about it like a big old funnel where there's a population of potential brides out there, and really probably over-gendering. I'll say couples that are going to have been engaged or about to get engaged. How do we get our awareness up with that group? Same thing wholesalers do on the potential distressed properties. There's a certain amount of distressed properties out there. How do we get awareness up that you are a wedding venue in that particular area? There are a variety of different tactics we use. We use Google ads. We use Facebook ads. On top of that, we hold events at the venue. We try and draw people in. So we're now involved with local groups that we actually hold events for those, like the Economic Development Council, all of that kind of stuff, in order to get people into the property. It's also near IU, both of these properties. So we hold events with sororities and stuff. Again, we're just trying to get the awarenesses. Yeah, there you go. I saw that one click there. We try and get the awareness as much as humanly possible, as early as possible, that we've got an incredible venue. And then on top of that, then we just try and get people to book tours. Tours then convert down into actual bookings after that point. So it's awareness, tours, bookings. Same thing on the wholesale side. It's awareness, contacts with the seller, and then eventually getting it under contract.
Is this something that you can do at a distance? Like let's say that I'm in California right now and I'm going, man, this is awesome. I'm going to start looking at wedding venues instead of maybe buying a short-term or a long-term rental. Is that something that I should do, or should I get my feet wet with real estate first? Because it sounds like you've got some competitive advantages because you're local. You've got the local infrastructure built out. Sounds like there is an operating part to this. Is this something I can do? I
actually disagree. Really? Yeah, I disagree with that. I am 90 miles away from my closest of the two wedding venues.
Oh, okay.
I would love to see my wedding venues more. There are two houses on that property. I love crashing in those places and let my two golden retrievers run around and enjoy the 125 acres. But no, I basically run it as a remote investor. That's how I run my real estate business too. I very rarely leave these four walls. This is my prison. This actually isn't an office. And so no, I actually think you can do it at a distance. Now, there are a variety of things you need to think about is, again, can you build the right team from a distance? Can you find the right people to run that place for you? If you can find that incredible team that is willing to be hands-on, can be service-oriented, can be sales-oriented, and that won't drop the ball on you, absolutely you can run it as a remote individual. I've been lucky enough to essentially do that. I probably only get down there, it's less recently, but I was going down about once a week as I was setting things up. But now I'm probably down there once a month.
Are you looking to buy more wedding venues?
I wasn't looking to buy a second wedding venue. So I don't plan past dinner. If a good opportunity came, I wouldn't turn it down. I feel really blessed that I've got an incredible team, and they like new challenges. They get bored if things are the same too often. So if I found a great opportunity and I felt like we could do it right, then absolutely, I would buy more wedding venues. So anybody who owns wedding venues, feel free to reach out. I will take the call. I'll tell you what people are looking for when they're buying a wedding venue.
Nick, this was an awesome episode. Thanks for coming on and joining us. We have 3 final questions for you. The first is, what is your favorite book? What would you recommend as the top book that our audience should read?
Yeah. So I've got 2 answers. One is the one I'm reading today. I'm really excited about it. It's The Expectant Father by Armin Brott. We're expecting a little one here any day. He's done an awesome job. Thank you. But then if I had to choose my favorite book of all time, it's a book that, yes, it's about negotiation, but it's about so much more than that. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I reread that one probably once a quarter. It's helps me with my relationships with my family, with my wife, and then obviously in the real estate and wedding game as well. It has just been an absolute game changer for the way I view the world.
Awesome. That is a great book, by the way. So our second question is, do you think that cash flow or appreciation is better?
Man, you're going to get me in trouble here. I'm going to alienate somebody with this answer. I actually think that isn't necessarily the right framework to think about things. The framework I like to look at things is that cash flow keeps the lights on. It's an absolute imperative. But if you're just focusing on that, you're missing the other four wealth drivers of real estate. You've got loan pay down, appreciation, inflation hedging, and tax benefits. So if you're just focusing on the cash flow, you're missing out on some really good things. So the way I like to think about it is where you are in your investing career. If you're early on and you can keep the lights on yourself, you don't need to live on that food. You wouldn't notice that extra $100 of cash flow in your income on a monthly basis. Then I think you should be focusing on those other four wealth drivers more. Now, it's very easy then, once you've built that equity, once you've got all that equity over time, to convert that into cash flow in the future by delevering and finding opportunities to do that. So with that in mind, I think, early on you focus on ROI, later you focus on kind of that cash flow and living on that, because you can't eat equity, unfortunately.
I wonder too how less of a problem cash flow actually is when you have an operating business like a wedding venue. Because if you figure out how to right size wedding venues and you're cash flowing, you're seeing monster cash flow there. I mean, that's even more of an opportunity that you can take on the appreciation side of real estate investing.
Yeah. Well, you're not wrong. That's actually my strategy moving forward. I would say is more of the A-class stuff that doesn't necessarily cash flow, but that, again, I don't have to think about.
Right. That's awesome. I love that. All right. Last question. What is one piece of advice you want to leave with our audience? What's the big idea that you want them to take away from it?
Yeah. I said it, I think, once before here on the podcast, but it's be around the football. Even if you don't know how you're going to get involved, even if you don't think there's anything that'll benefit you, the number of times where I've just had a conversation with somebody, or I've tried to help somebody get a deal over the finish line, and I somehow have gotten involved in this deal, somehow ended up with a 2.67% interest rate on a wedding venue just by being around the football. It's probably been 5 times in my career that have helped me gain millions of dollars worth of equity in that time. So be around the football. Don't always look for how you're going to get paid in a deal. Just be there and see what happens. You're going to be shocked at the outcomes.
Nick, really appreciate you coming on. This was an awesome episode. How can people contact you if they have any questions coming out of today's episode?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to get in touch with me is email. I'm pretty good at it. It's nick@offleashinvestments.com. You can find me at Off Leash Investments on Instagram. You can find me at Nick Giulioni on Twitter. I'm pretty darn accessible. Don't hesitate. I'm down to help people get started in real estate investing, and absolutely loved the interview today. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Loved
Nick.
this episode. Appreciate it, Nick.
Be around the football. Even if you don't know how you're going to get involved, even if you don't think there's anything that'll benefit you, the number of times where I've just had a conversation with somebody, or I've tried to help somebody get a deal over the finish line, and I somehow have gotten involved in this deal, somehow ended up with a 2.67% interest rate on a wedding venue just by being around the football. It's probably been 5 times in my career that have helped me gain millions of dollars worth of equity in that time. So be around the football. Don't always look for how you're going to get paid in a deal. Just be there and see what happens. You're going to be shocked at the outcomes. Be around the football. Even if you don't know how you're going to get involved, even if you don't think there's anything that'll benefit you, the number of times where I've just had a conversation with somebody, or I've tried to help somebody get a deal over the finish line, and I somehow have gotten involved in this deal, somehow ended up with a 2.67% interest rate on a wedding venue just by being around the football. It's probably been 5 times in my career that have helped me gain millions of dollars worth of equity in that time. So be around the football. Don't always look for how you're going to get paid in a deal. Just be there and see what happens. You're going to be shocked at the outcomes.